Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started with the introductions of our panelists, I'd like to do a quick test to see who we have in the audience, and maybe, get a feel for you guys to see what, the interests of the audience are and where we're at. So, before we get started, can you please raise your hand if you have ever owned or traded cryptocurrencies? So put up your hand, nice and high, nice and high. Okay, all right, we got some crypto people in here. Who here, keep your hand up if you've ever owned Livepeer tokens? Under Livepeer tokens, good. And of those people, how many of them have ever delegated to an orchestrator? Hands up, nice and high, nice and high. Okay. Well, this is our opportunity to convert you guys to delegate to some orchestrators. But that being said, what's really cool about the Livepeer network is we have these node operators, and they come in from around the globe. Everyone here is from different parts of the earth, and we provide resources in a decentralized, permissionless way. So on the very left here, we have Frank, who runs the Ultima Ratio node, Ultima Ratio orchestrator. We have Chris, who is a longtime transcoder and orchestrator. We have Alex, who runs the Syrinx orchestrator. And we have Varies, who runs the Varies and Numers orchestrator. So again, please round of applause for our audience, or our panelists. So let's get to know our panelists a little bit, and I'll start with the first question. And it's very simple. I'd like to know how these people learned about Livepeer and what their first experience was. So we'll start at the very end. Frank, could you tell us a little bit about how you learned about Livepeer and how you got involved?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for my English, it's not very good, so I will try to do my best. So I start with Livepeer. At the beginning, I found some Livepeer on my ETH account, and I was interested by that. Say, what's that? What I have Livepeer on my account? So I check on internet and discover this program to encode video, and that was very interesting. So I was start with Nikovi nodes. It's a node who was open for all people who want to join. So I start with that. And a few months ago, in May 2021, my wife decided to create a node on a computer, on Windows. So we start like that. And a few months after, she asked me to help her to create a node on Linux, because she don't know Linux at all. So I create the first node. And with all the community, we start to be very interested by that, and we create other nodes over the world, and we are very, very enthusiastic since 1 year, because the team is just incredible and the community is incredible, and that's all. Thank you.
Very cool. Chris?
Okay, I'll try and keep this as succinct as I can, but I might struggle.
Chris, you're not succinct about anything. You
Thank
keep
you.
going and going.
Thank
No,
you,
no,
Tyson.
go ahead, go ahead.
Thank you, Tyson. So, okay, I just come back. So how I found out about Livepeer. I had just come back from like a 2-year traveling trip where I'd been trying to get myself away from the computer, because I spent so much time at the computer or at the screen. And I'd had 2 years away, and when I came back, there was some things that started to interest me on the computers again. And one of these things was this thing called Bitcoin, which maybe some people in the room have heard of. And the other thing I saw was this thing called live streaming, because I'd been away, I'd missed all the Meerkat stuff and Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and I came back and I'm like, this seems interesting, this cryptocurrency and this live streaming thing. And I thought, oh gosh, well, I've got to kind of focus my efforts down onto one of these things to kind of research and find out more about, but I just simply couldn't. And I kept on researching both of these things, and after some time I thought, wow, all this kind of like decentralized network storage platforms like IPFS, they're just so wholesome and good for the world. Like, but while my live streaming, I'm doing it all via Facebook and YouTube, and it's like a lot of hard work doing it via these channels. Could we build some sort of system that is like decentralized live streaming. So I talked to a few people and said, hey, what do you think of this idea? And people were like, yeah, good idea, whatever. And then someone wrote back and said, the guy who founded IPFS wrote back to me one day and said, have you seen Livepeer? And I was like, I've never heard of this thing, quickly looked it up, and my first reaction was, God damn it, someone's doing it already. They already got the idea. No, I've got to, that's my competition. Should I try and compete with them? Should I try and do with, oh, they already look quite sophisticated. They have a white paper and everything. And they look like they've got some like technical implementation, and I'm just a guy with some ideas. Wait, maybe I could make friends with them. Maybe I could help them. Maybe I could like be part of this. So I wrote an email, I think, to Doug and Eric and said, hey, what you're doing I think is really cool. I'd like to know if I could help somehow. I think that maybe answers the question.
Very good, yeah, no,
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Succinct.
And Chris is a long time a part of the network, so we're great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alex, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, so it's actually, I didn't know this, but it's quite similar to Chris. So the first, I think it was either 2017 or 2018. So it was right after I graduated college, and it was in Boston. And a friend of mine at MIT was like, yeah, like the guy who started IPFS is presenting like IP, like he's just gonna talk about it for an hour. So I thought, okay, like I'll go and like we'll see what that's like. So he does his talk, and then it was very interesting because IPFS was kind of a novel thing at the time. And sure enough, like afterwards, he was like, yeah, I have to go like look at this. I'm like, saw this cool thing, and he was very enamored with like IPFS is great, but it can't really do anything live. And yeah, so Juan Benet was just like floored with Livepeer. And I was like, okay, I think I'll look into this. Like Juan's a smart guy. So that was my first real engagement. And I should have tried to get more LPT then, but that didn't happen for another like 2 years. So yeah, so oddly enough, IPFS guys were kind of the biggest initial push for me. And then yeah, like LPT just showed up in my ledger at some point. So yeah, that worked too. That strategy also worked.
Yeah, very. Yeah, there's the Merkle mine, I believe, which is the method of airdropping people the LPT tokens, which at 120 we'll be talking about the Livepeer economics, and that's actually one of the questions I have for Doug around that strategy over in the other room at 120. So very good to see you, Alex. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have Varies. Varies, would you like to tell us your experience?
Sure. So I got into Ethereum, or like the blockchain space in general, in like 2016 or something, and then I was just like really hooked ever since, and I was like researching all the different projects, and I think I came to Livepeer through like a Reddit post or then like a blog post. Back then I think Twitter wasn't that like the main hub, and yeah, I took part in the Merkle mine actually, in the token distribution, and I think in like early 2018, I set up my own orchestrator. And I mean, I started off as a delegator, but then I noticed that the orchestrator to which I was delegating to, they weren't like really reliable, and they weren't doing the daily rework calls. Some were just increasing their fees with like no announcement whatsoever from one round to another. And then I decided, yeah, I can do better, and I set up my own orchestrator. And I was also hoping, of course, to attract some stake by providing a highly reliable but low-fee orchestrator.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us, Varies. And if the audience ever has a question, I'm not going to hold it to the end. If you've got a question, just throw up your hand, and we can get to you right away. If you want to ask any questions. Do we have a microphone that can go back there? Or do you want to just shout it out and I'll... Yeah.
It's more of a question about the first presentation we saw. At the end of it, there was, it said something like scaling to tens of thousands of viewers. Like, what's the bottleneck? Is that a business problem, or is it a technical one? And why tens of thousands?
So I believe the question is, scaling Livepeer to tens of thousands of people, why is that important, right? I guess, is that the question?
No, the question is, why is it not millions?
Why is it what?
Why is it not millions? Why
Oh, why is it not
only
millions?
10,000?
Oh my goodness, absolutely.
Billions.
I like your thought process. Think
Tens
big,
of
you know? Get out of the room. You're thinking too small. Does anyone, who wants to take that question? Who's got an answer, they think? Chris, you just sighed.
Like,
You can
I
go
don't
for
know,
it.
like there's something about you don't want to scare people with numbers that are way, way big when you present stuff. Like if you start saying infinite or billions and millions, like as I understand it, the architecture of the network is designed in a way where it can scale quote unquote infinitely if there's enough capacity provided in terms of GPUs. So like I don't know why 10,000 was the number brought up, but I'm kind of aware that it's possible to scale far beyond something like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like it wasn't our slide, obviously, so we'd have to probably ask Doug. But no, I think any number you put out now is it can be more or less just depending on the growth of the network and demand. So yeah, very good. And like I said, if you got a question, hopefully that answers your question. Cool. Okay, let's keep moving on. Another question, and if you guys have a question for each other, feel free to butt in and ask each other questions and keep going. So the next question I have, and I'll start with Alex for this one, at random. This is not, I'm not just picking on anyone. I guess what has been the most satisfying experience of being a video miner?
Well, I had a bunch of quadros I wasn't using for anything that interesting, and now I have something that's pretty interesting to use them for. So there's that part. I think the other thing is, as like a relatively technical person, there's a lot of leniency on both sides. So like I've forked stuff, and then people like you and Joey, some other nodes, have been very receptive to that. And yeah, I don't know. It's been a very iterative project as well. There's some projects that will sort of like, you know, they'll have a peak of a lot of throughput development-wise, and Livepeer's had a lot of just bandwidth in general. So it's been, yeah, good for using the GPUs that I'm sitting around, and a great excuse to have really fast internet. That's, my girlfriend has no clue why we need a 2 gig connection, but now we do. So that's.
Anything to convince your girlfriend of just about anything is a good idea. Thank Livepeer for that. Frank, what again, most satisfying experience with running your Orchestrator node thus far?
I think for us, it's feeling being part of these things. It's a very big satisfaction for us. All day we are monitoring our node from home, and we see the demands growing, and we have all the community and the team behind to help us, and we can exchange all at any hours in the day because it's worldwide. So we really feel part of something very interesting and growing, and it's why I think we love a lot.
Yeah, I find the community aspect really amazing. By show of hands, who here is in a Web3 community thus far, right? Put up your hand. In some fashion. You know, it's amazing to see that people feel welcomed in Web3, whereas, you know, do you really feel welcomed at YouTube or these big corporate giants, right? It's not quite the same. No, I would agree. Varies, satisfying. What has been your most satisfying experience?
I guess like through the monitoring, you can really see what's happening on your orchestrator. So it really helps to like visualize what our nodes are actually doing. And one stat that really impressed me is like I can see that I'm transcoding many weeks of video per day, which is to me like mind blowing. Like I didn't imagine that it was that much, but it's really great to see that it's possible for like an individual to help transcoding that much stream.
Very cool. And Chris, satisfying?
Yeah, I think for me it's something about seeing, like Frank hit the nail on the head with like feeling part of something, but seeing the evidence that fellow orchestrators on the network are starting to like get value from the protocol, not only in terms of fees and winning tickets, but also being able to call a reward and get a share of the inflation and start to kind of like see the trickle of real financial value coming into their control, it's like, you know, we're onto something here.
Very cool. Now I want to shift gears a little bit because we talked about the great things of Livepeer. We talked about the transformative global problem that Livepeer is solving, which is to be the world's open video infrastructure. Let's talk about the challenges that you face as running an Orchestrator node. Frank, let's start you off over there. What are some of the challenges you faced when operating, and give us an example.
I don't know. At the beginning, that was to keeping a reliable node, because it's only in our home at the beginning, so we have to always be sure your internet connection was okay. So I contact the IPS and say maybe I have a second box or something like that to be sure I will not be cut from the network. So after we start to create node and rent server around the world, so I sleep well because I say it's okay if I have a problem at home, it's okay that keep running somewhere, so it's okay. So that was the most difficult part for us at the beginning to succeed in create node and monitoring them, and we learn a lot of things about Linux and blockchain, etc. So that's great anyway.
Very good. Varies, I know you've been operating a node for about 4 years now. You said 2018. I'm sure you've been through a lot of the growth. What challenges have you faced since then? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess the biggest challenge definitely was when the Ethereum network was really congested. So it's not per se a Livepeer problem, but more like, I mean, the daily rework calls were costing in the hundreds of dollars, and that was really required a lot of manual attention for the node. So you had to plan your rework calls because I didn't want my stakers to miss out on the inflationary Livepeer tokens. But then you had to plan the transaction or to see if it actually went through by setting a lower gas price. So that was a struggle, but luckily that's behind us now with the layer 2 migration. Apart from that, I mean, it was just back then, like it was 3 years ago when I set up the node, there weren't that many tutorial or like help available. So, and I didn't have any DevOps knowledge whatsoever. So that was definitely a learning experience. But yeah, I think now we've come a really long way with like custom implementation of the Orchestrator software, and with the Discord, all the help, all the tutorials, and layer 2.
Alex, same question. Frustrations, challenges you faced?
Well, initially it was finding cheap GPUs with fast bandwidth. It's interesting because at least in North America, a lot of the cheaply available GPU hosts they're run by like single people. Like VelociHost is actually one guy, which I had no clue. And explaining to them why you need like one GPU and like 20 terabytes of bandwidth was, they were like, why would you want that? So yeah, that was an initial challenge before I could run stuff from my home. And then initially, I mean, there wasn't a ton of documentation, but that didn't bother me too much because I could find what I needed. Yeah, so mostly just L1 stuff. Like when it was $400 to claim a ticket, and understanding if stuff was working initially. I mean, I think I got lucky because I was one of a few people who had like 2 tickets within, I think, the first 4 days of running an Orchestrator. But of course, it made sense that there were lots of others who, for weeks, would be like, I'm not sure that everything is right, and like, So there were problems I didn't encounter, but I'd say the L1 stuff was big, and then just finding hardware that wasn't financially just like ludicrous to host. Because like if you were to go to Amazon, and even with spot instances, which you can rent more cheaply, the economics don't make sense. But yeah.
Yeah, layer 1 fees were, I want to say a right bitch, but that's probably not right to say. Well, I did already. Okay, Chris, tell us a little bit about your challenges you face.
I think for me, there's something about debugging the complexity of the stack that you've put out there. So like if you put a vanilla orchestrator out there, you've got like your internet connection, you've got your server, you've got connection to blockchain, you've got like are my ports open? So you start something up and like it's like, okay, how do I know if this thing is working or not? Like, have I done it right? And then suddenly you get a stream come in and you're like, oh wow, okay, right, so streams can come in. But wait, I didn't get a ticket yet. So maybe is the ticket, am I getting tickets? Do I just have to be patient and wait for a winning ticket? Or is there some issue with how I'm claiming the ticket? And maybe there isn't an issue with claiming the ticket. And actually then suddenly all my streams stop. And like, did I do something bad? Like, did I do something wrong? Or did just the broadcaster just stop broadcasting? Or maybe the broadcaster like started using a different orchestrator because they found someone better and someone better came onto the network. It's like, or maybe it's just my internet connections die. Like I don't know what, like, so it's like observability of the different interconnectivity between the different components that we use and helping people to first to like get a sense check that you've done it right and everything is fine, you've received the ticket. Some of the monitoring stuff is really good for that, but I still think we have a way to go for new joiners on the network to kind of feel like they've done it and they're ready now and they can start actually adding capacity to this network.
Absolutely. Any questions in the audience regarding any of this stuff? Yes, go ahead.
I'm new to the community, so I'm curious on how easy is it to become an orchestrator. After hearing what you just said, I think it's hard. Are there any plans on making it easy, and is that some of the problems like you want to solve to be more scalable by onboarding with user-friendly user interface and knowing you're setting it up right?
Great, thank you so much. So the question is it difficult to become an orchestrator, and what's being done to maybe simplify that process and improve that? And actually, we have Alex here, who is, what is your title? Product lead?
I'm a TPM.
TPM, I don't even know what that means, but I'll let Alex answer this question because I think he can have some good insight. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the first thing is how long you're willing to wait out for this to become a profitable enterprise. I guess if you have more money to throw at this initially, you'll be able to attract more stake in theory. So yeah, I think now with L2, it's cheaper than it's ever been before. And the barrier to entry in terms of performance is a little bit lower.
Other than barrier of entry, technically, how difficult is it, and what are you working on maybe to improve that process?
Sure. So it's still relatively technical. I mean, you can run on Windows or Linux. I think the learning curve for Linux is probably worth it because it's a bit more stable and it's easier to find resources to, like if you don't have a great internet connection, GPUs that are Linux-based are easier to find. So I think if you're willing to get through that learning curve, it's not too bad. There's a lot of great information available, and I think other than that, just having like a basic understanding of how to use a hardware wallet or to navigate bridging infrastructure in with the Ethereum network, which is still quite new. I think if you can get through that, those are the main hurdles, and then otherwise it's mostly DevOps. So having reasonable ways to making sure that your box is up and doing the things it should be doing.
How simple do you think it should be? Do you think Livepeer should aim towards a one-click launch for an orchestrator, or is there always going to be that element of experience required to run an orchestrator node? Like, how simple or complex should it be, ideally, do you think?
So for me personally, I think like a one-click, like download something and then just one click and you can start transcoding. I think that might be more simple than we'd want it, because you can only grant so much reliability and performance with that. So if you wanted maybe just a node to learn with, or because you just wanted to understand more about the Livepeer network, that could be a good option. But I think for orchestrators that actually want to break even or compete with, say, the top half of other orchestrators, I think there's an inherent sort of technical gap you have to breach. And I think there's a lot of value just generally for like the Web3 community for people just to learn that way. So I think, at some point it should be really simple, but I think especially for the way the network is now, there are benefits to it inherently being a little bit more technical. So, and for instance, like you'd never be able, I don't think having a one-click solution would ever quite work for having 6 nodes distributed across North America.
Sure.
But for one, it would be, I think, reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, you're nodding your head.
Yeah.
Jump in.
Also, like on the question, I think it's something that there is huge amounts of documentation out there on setting up an Orchestrator node. Like there's video tutorials, there's stuff that Livepeer Inc. publish, there's like independent community contributions that have said this is how I set up a node. One thing I would really recommend, if you're interested in running an Orchestrator, do it on a testnet first. And like there's full instructions about how to set something up on Arbitrum testnet, and doesn't have to cost you any money. If any mistakes get made, whatever, and you can set the thing fully up on Arbitrum testnet and Livepeer testnet, and when you're ready to go mainnet, it's just exactly the same approach, but just mainnet instead of testnet. So there's like a really nice kind of sandbox breeding ground for new orchestrators to just learn the mechanics in a safe and zero-cost environment, that once you kind of feel confident to then take the step up to mainnet, it's just a flick a few variables and you're on mainnet.
Wonderful. We got about 9 minutes left, so if you do have another question, put up your hand. This was a really quick question, or maybe it's not, I don't know. Time commitments. Is this a full-time gig, a part-time gig? How much time do you spend working on your Orchestrator node in general? I'll start with Vires.
Great question. Yeah, I think in general I'm probably spending like for sure 1 to 2 hours per day, but that's more like by choice, I would say, because I like the community. I like messing around with the Livepeer stuff, like the monitoring, the tooling. But for example, when I'm on holidays, I can really like scale it down to like 1 hour per week or something, just like check if everything is running. I mean, I've set up multiple monitoring tools, so I get alerted if something is wrong. So if I want to, I can just like, shut down myself and relax a bit. But yeah, I mean, I really like spending time in the community, so I guess for me, it's not a full-time gig, but definitely one of the biggest time commitments from my side.
Very good. Alex?
I'll be quick, but I think if you put more work into your DevOps stuff, then down the road, you'll just have less time worrying about whether your node is up. So, and then like yours, I just like looking at it sometimes, It's fun to do. It's a nice way to kill time.
Just sitting. My fiance is like, why is there a big screen TV with your node on it? Like, can you not have that on? I'm like, yeah, but look at it. Look at all the streams. Minute, and there goes my water. That's okay. It'll evaporate. It's streaming. Yeah, exactly. I'm too distracted. My fiance is like, what are you doing? Chris?
I would say, in answer to your question, how much time you need to spend, I would say it really is as little or as much as you want. Like, it can be as little as check your phone to see the notification that the node called reward that day, and then in some ways kind of like, that's done. Maybe just check that it's processing streams and it's not 0 streams. There might be something to debug, and that could be like, 30 seconds first thing in the morning, and then you forget about it for the rest of the day. Also, like, you can spend 16 waking hours every day researching stuff, like watching what's happening in the community, reading new documentation, like trying new things, thinking about projects for how to improve your setup so that it's more reliable and robust. So it's kind of like the entire spectrum of how much you want to put into it. And I really feel like the more you put into it, in answer to your question, how much time you need to spend, I would say it really is as little or as much as you want. Like, it can be as little as check your phone to see the notification that the node called reward that day, and then in some ways kind of like, that's done. Maybe just check that it's processing streams and it's not 0 streams. There might be something to debug, and that could be like, 30 seconds first thing in the morning, and then you forget about it for the rest of the day. Also, like, you can spend 16 waking hours every day researching stuff, like watching what's happening in the community, reading new documentation, like trying new things, thinking about projects for how to improve your setup so that it's more reliable and robust. So it's kind of like the entire spectrum of how much you want to put into it.
Our network.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Can we please get a round of applause for our panelists?